Good evening, everyone. The reading this evening is taken from Revelation chapter 2, verses 1 to 11. To the angel of the church in Ephesus write, "These are the words of him who holds the 7 stars in his right hand and walks among the 7 golden lampstands. I know your deeds, your hard work, and your perseverance. I know that you cannot tolerate wicked people, that you have tested those who claim to be apostles but are not, and have found them false. You have persevered and have endured hardships for my name, and have not grown weary. Yet I hold this against you. You have forsaken the love you had at first. Consider how far you have fallen. Repent and do the things you did at first. If you do not repent, I will come to you and remove your lampstand from its place. But you have this in your favor. You hate the practices of the Nicolaitans, which I also hate. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To the one who is victorious, I will give the right to eat from the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God. To the angel of the church in Smyrna write, these are the words of him who is the first and the last, who died and came to life again. I know your afflictions and your poverty, yet you are rich. I know about the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not be afraid of what you are about to suffer. I tell you, the devil will put some of you in prison to test you, and you will suffer persecution for 10 days. Be faithful, even to the point of death, and I will give you life as your victor's crown. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who is victorious will not be hurt at all by the second death." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Thank you, Dawn. Good evening, everyone. If you've been here for a bit, you will know we have been doing a tour through the Bible. We have just finished recently going through the book of Acts. And as was posed to me during the piece, it was a question of, well, what they asked what I was speaking on. I said Revelation. We were just in Acts a few moments ago. Why are we on Revelation now? And what I say to them, and what I said to them, and what I say to you, is we've been through the book of Acts. We have followed the narrative of the New Testament and the early church. And once you've got to that, a number of the epistles, the books that follow on from Acts, relate to events that have happened in Acts, or relate to parts of the timeline which is covered in Acts. And then we get to this point where you go, well, what's next? Revelation. The end times, the things way off in the future, or maybe tomorrow or even tonight, we don't know. All hopefully not all will be revealed, but we will go and we'll unpack and investigate. We will see what God is conveying to us in this book. So here we are. We've got a few weeks we're going to do it. It is not a detailed, slow look throughout every precise detail, wrestling with what this means and that means and the other means. This is going to be a quick quiz, as we've done with all the other books through this sort of look through the Bible. But tonight I want to start with a story from my own life, a story which was when I was in my late teens, and I, at this time, had been probably about 5 years on from the point where I'd say I'd become a Christian. I'd prayed the prayer, if you will. I had committed and said, God, I know you are real. I want to follow you. But those 5 years had not necessarily gone to plan. I had lived a very duplicitous life where some moments I was very on fire for God and some moments I was very not on fire for God, we shall say. And it all built and built and went on and went on. And it comes to this climax on this fateful night where it got to a point where myself and one of my close friends, our lives were very much in danger considering some of the choices we had made. And in this moment where time just froze, stood still, and I felt like there was a realistic chance life might end, I heard God speak, the clearest I have ever God speak in my life. And he outlined this choice. He said I could continue choosing to live my life the way I was choosing to do so, where I was ruling my own life, choosing what I want to do, going, oh, this will be good, this is the best for me. And I could go that way and live with the consequences of that. Or I could let my actions match the words I was speaking, and I could live life in all of its fullness. Rather than chasing life in all of its fullness, I could actually experience it. And in that moment, God gave me that choice. I heard God speak as clear as I've ever heard. And I had a decision. What was I going to do about it? Well, fast forward a fair few years, more than I'd like to imagine. And I am here. I am with you. I am speaking on Revelation 2 and 3. We're grouping all the 7 letters together. We're focused on 2 because I thought getting Dawn to read out all 7 would keep us going for quite a while. But you're probably aware, in the Bible, the authors of the Bible, the people who write the books, can speak in many different ways. They can use the words that they put on the text as a way to communicate about God, but they can also use literary devices, or, in the instance of what I'm going to look at tonight, the structure. As I was reading this, as I was studying this and meditating on this, the thing that kept coming out to me was how the structure of all 7 letters is identical. It is absolutely to the point, very much identical, and it has these similarities that run through it. And it's led me to 3 questions we're going to consider tonight. The first is, who do we see God as, or how do we view God? The second is, what is God's message for us? And the third, what are we going to do about it? Much like that decision I had to make when we hear God, we have a choice. What are we going to do about it? So the first one, when we get to how to review God, all 7 letters of Revelation for the 7 churches start with this, with an exclamation about something about Jesus. You'll see it all different, all very much ranging. The ones that we've had tonight, you've got the fact you've got this idea of him who holds the 7 stars in his right hand and walks among the 7 gold lampstands. And then to Smyrna, it's to the first and the last who died and came to life again. There are obviously the others for the other ones, but these are the truths. It starts with a declaration. We are starting with who Jesus is. This whole letter, the letters for each church, it wants to make clear it starts with Jesus. And one of the things I would say to you is, as we go through Revelation can get what I would term as very revelation-y, which is there's all sorts of beasts, there's all sorts of antichrists, there's all sorts of these things which confuse us, and numbers and everything. And we're like, what does that mean? What are you referring to there? How do I make sense of this? But through it all, peel it all back, the truth of the message is the same. The truth of the message is Revelation, like every other book of the Bible, is about Jesus. And Revelation communicates about the fact that in amongst everything we will read, the Lamb, who is Jesus, wins. He has won, he has claimed that victory, and we read it acted out. And we can get into discussions of how that plays out at another point. But that is the core of Revelation. And that is what we can so easily lose sight of. We can get weighed down with debating whether it's literal, whether it's figurative, whether this is going to happen, whether we're in the end times now or whether that's a long way away. we can get lost in it all. But the thing we need to cling to as confusion rises up, as it probably will, is that the Lamb wins. Jesus wins. And that is what this is saying above all else. So we start with Jesus. We start with the declarations. And how we view Jesus matters immensely. The significance of getting our view of Jesus right determines how we act. If we just think of Jesus as just, as this righteous judge that has come to rule over everyone at the end, if we just focus on that is how we view Jesus, just that, then we spend our lives thinking about making sure we're doing the right choices, the right things. It's all about making the right choice. It's all about us, when the reality is we miss out on the grace of Jesus. We miss out on the fact that he is the way that he came and died for us. We're focusing too much on this, the judgment, the right and wrongs of decisions. It's about us, where it's not about us. It's about him. And equally, we can get into the opposite way around, where if we focus in some ways too much on the grace, we just forget about the fact that we have this responsibility, this call to live separate, distinct lives today. We can go completely the opposite way and think, well, it doesn't matter what I do today, because at the end of the day, Jesus has already died. Jesus has got the victory, and we can get lost in all of this, and we can lead to unhealthy practices, unhealthy ways of living. And that comes from having a warped view of who Jesus is. And then how can we make sure our view of Jesus is reasonable, is accurate, is right? Well, I've got a few suggestions. Some of them you'll hear a few times over the course of this evening in the other points. But first is, I think one we often overlook, is talking with others. There are plenty of very learned people in this room who know the Bible inside and out, who know God and have known God and lived obedient lives for him for a number of years and have just followed him wholeheartely. They are great people to bounce off of, great people to learn from. We can talk about it. They're not going to judge you if you say something and they're like, ooh, I'm not so sure about that. That's not them going, oh, you are wrong, you don't deserve to be here. We want the best for each other. We are for one another. We want to learn together and sharpen each other. But also, like I just said, you've got the Bible. The Bible is the way that God chooses the best way to reveal about himself to us. Jesus came, lived, died, and that was one revelation of how God is and what God is like. But he chose the best way for all people in all times to know what God is like is through his word. This is the way that he's chosen to communicate that to us. So consequently, if we want to make sure our view of Jesus, our view of God is right, then we should be reading this. We should be meditating on this. We should be reflecting upon it and trying to test our picture of Jesus and go, is that what matches when I read this? So starting, as I say, first essential point is how do we view God or how do we view Jesus? Second, what is Jesus' message? What is God's message for us? So again, going back to the structure, each of the 7 letters then split into a very contextually specific message that you can learn a lot from them. They're all very applicable in many ways to us. You'll read it, and the very great learned theologians that talk about this, there's one that talks about this idea of if the shoe fits, he likes to refer to when reading these, because he goes, it's so applicable that you can read it and be like, well, that's just me. I'm reading exactly like how I'm living right now. So he's like, that is your application, is read that letter as if it's for you because the shoe is fitting you. But we all have these messages are a mixture. They're a mixture of sometimes it might be rebuking something. They might be going, actually, you've steered off course over here. Sometimes it might be a level of a warning. It's like God is warning them to be like, this is a way that's coming, or something that's coming, the persecution. That in the second letter we read about this great wave of persecution where some people will die as a result of this. He is warning them that this is coming, a challenge that is coming. So there's these mixtures of what the messages might be. But all of God's messages are not to destroy. They're not to break down. They are to build up. They are to encourage. They're to inspire. They are for our betterment. It is not to destroy individuals. It's not to break them down. So as we seek to hear from God, what is your message? And I'm going to invite us, when I'm finished, to have a few moments just to pause and listen and see if there is something that God is saying to us tonight individually. Is that a question of testing, like, what comes to mind? Is this for my better? Is this building me up? Is this from a God of love? Or is this a sign of something that might be destructive and harmful? Because that is not how God communicates. God is not about seeing us destroyed and belittled. He wants us encouraged and built up. And as I say, we see it through here, this idea of cautions about the persecution. He talks about the fact that they think of themselves as being poor, but they are not. God is encouraging you view yourself as being poor because you're viewing yourself in an earthly sense, but spiritually you are rich. And that is obviously immensely significant, building them up before the warning of the persecution that is going to come, the persecution that is rising. It's like, hold fast, stay true, you're okay. And in the first letter to the Ephesians, it's this idea of the people that have fallen out of they have forsaken their first love. They've sort of got maybe a bit complacent. They've maybe just mellowed. Life has taken over. They're just going day to day because life makes it a bit difficult sometimes to feel super enthusiastic and on fire for God. That is the reality, and this is a warning, but this is a rebuking of, you have done this, but I want more than this for you. I want to get back to that first time when you fell in love with me and that was all that you could think about and all that you were deciding to live by. And as God is saying, come back to me, bring back to me. It is for the encouragement, the betterment, the helping them live life in all its fullness. God wants all of us to know what it means to live a life that is about loving him with all of our hearts, our souls, and our minds. That is what God desires for us, as well as that for each other. And that is, as I say, the messages God brings is along those lines. And the message he'll bring for us possibly will be along those lines. But how do we know whether it's God speaking or not? Well, some of us may have heard God speak a number of times, and you can sometimes people grow a strong sense or a strong experience of knowing what God's voice sounds like, and they will be able to pick it out and have some confidence in it. But some of us, that might not be the case, and the idea of listening and trying to pick God's voice out from the thoughts in your mind might be terrifying you. But I would say this is where, again, the point I mentioned earlier, talk to someone about it. I was at the men's breakfast yesterday morning, and I was talking to someone, and we were talking about one of the greatest challenges in life and to live like vibrantly for God is when we're in a season of isolation, when we isolate ourselves from others. Because actually by talking to people, by being vulnerable with people, by sharing what we think God is doing, by sharing what we think God is saying, it brings life, it brings energy. God's word is living. It's not a dead word, it's a living, vibrant word. So when we talk about it, when we share it, it brings energy, rightfully, understandably, it brings energy into our lives, into those that we're sharing. And again, they might turn around and be like, ooh, I'm not so sure about that one. But it gives you a sounding board to test it. Is this from God? Does it sound right, like it matches up with their understanding of God as well as your own? It's not to say that they are the fount of all knowledge and wisdom and that is the only testing point. But it's so amazing how many times you can, just by talking about it to someone, be affirmed that actually I'm fairly certain this is God's voice. Or you go, oh, actually by talking this out, I'm not so sure that was God's voice. Maybe that was me thinking about this because of this thing that's going on over here, which I really want to see resolved, so I'm influencing what I'm thinking God is saying. And then the other thing, again, I mentioned it earlier, way to test God's voice is by reading his voice, by reading his word. Does it match? Is what he's saying matching up with things that sound in the same vein, the same spirit of the scriptures that he's given us, of his word that we can read, that we can study, we can meditate on? If it does, that's a good starting point. If it doesn't, that's a big red flag of hold on a moment. And again, these are 2 points that I want to emphasize, because that is a core way we can help distinguish what is God's voice and what isn't. It's by talking to people and by reading it as it was written and inspired by God. So then we come to our third section, the what are we going to do about it? We have thought about Jesus. We have got a good view of God. We have made sure that is correct and true. We have then heard from God. We are confident what we have heard is from God. But we are faced with this decision, like I was faced with that decision those years ago. What are we going to do about it? Are we going to take that step that sometimes is a bit scary, sometimes is a bit of out of comfort zone, sometimes it's like, I really don't want to do that, but God, can you choose anything else? Or are we going to do something like Jonah, where we go and run the opposite direction, we come up with all the excuses possible and charge off in the complete different direction because we're like, no, I really, really don't want to do that, and I'm going to choose to live my way rather than yours. We might not quite go to the extreme lengths of Jonah, but it's so easy to come up with excuses. It's so easy to be like, I've got to get to point A to point B. I've got this appointment that's coming up, so I can't stop for that person there that I'm feeling like God's asking me to speak to. On Friday, I was doing the school run with our eldest, who is 5, dropping off at St. Paul's, and we walked past this elderly man that was making his way very slowly up Gresham Avenue, which we walk up to on the way to school. And I'm walking past him, being quite concerned about his well-being, and a bit like, I just felt this prompting of, you should stop, you should stop, you should stop. And honestly, I didn't in that moment. I carried on because I've got to get Elijah, our eldest, to school. Like, he would struggle greatly with the idea of us stopping, going, I'm going to be told off if I don't get to school. And it's like, I don't want him to be getting all worked up and then this just escalates. So what I did was just like prayed, I was like, God, either bring someone else alongside him, or can he be still on his way when I come back? And lo and behold, I was coming home. Imi, my youngest, had a swimming lesson not long after, and he was still making his way up. And I, along with another person, stopped. And we were able to get him the support and the help that he was able to get and needed. And he was able to be looked after. The police came, picked him up, and took him where he needed to go. And all was, well, I trust all that is okay, obviously. You don't know everything of the story. But it meant that then, that morning, I lost all that I intended for that morning to be. But it was because of this one incident where I first was like, actually, no, I wasn't willing to be interrupted. I chose in that way to let my decision, my priorities dictate what I was going to do. But then I had a second chance, and I was like, no, God, if you've given me the second chance, I'm going to listen. I'm going to allow myself to be interrupted. I'm going to allow myself to stop. And did, and yes, thankfully got the support that was needed. There's one example of what it might look like, a willingness to be interrupted. There are many other ways it can look like. You might have a decision of, do you change jobs? Or the flip of it, do you stay in a job that is difficult? I think we can often stand and talk about bold decisions as being changing circumstance. But I think of some of the people I've met over the years where the biggest, boldest decisions they've made is to stay where they are, when everything in many ways in them wanted to get out of it, but they've trusted that God sort of spoken to them the idea of staying, and they've trusted in that, in amongst everything that tells them, get out, in amongst people who are advising them that, if I was you, I'd go. Their colleagues telling them to leave, sort of suggesting they leave, but they're like, no, I'm going to stay. There is a boldness in staying at points, much like there's a boldness in leaving and changing. And we've got to work this through. we've got to decide. I love our vision here at St. Paul's. This idea that we want to give everyone in our area a meaningful opportunity to respond to the good news of Jesus. But if we are serious about that as a church, if we are serious that that is what we want for the surrounding area, every single individual to have that chance, then it requires all of us to be in on this, and not just partly in on this. We have to be all in on this, because everyone here will have a different group of people you are interacting with. And most of you will interact with completely different people than I would ever see, even in a given week. And if I can't do that, we as a staff team here definitely can't do that. It needs the buy-in of everyone, of who are the people you are interacting with, who are the people where you can take that bold step, where God is pushing you and nudging you. And again, thinking of a friend who got nudged who decided their bold thing they were going to do was that they were a teacher. And every break time, or every day, they decided they were going to bring snacks in to put into the, what is it? What was the room called? It's gone from my mind. Staff room. My apologies. But to bring snacks into the staff room and leave it there as an encouragement for the staff. Obviously, over a long period of time, fair financial expense. But a number of conversations they would have with teachers who were like, why are you doing it? Sort of like, why are you bringing it all in? Like, it just opened up doors for conversations to naturally happen from something that was very simple. It doesn't need to be big and grand. It can be often the small things that can make these differences. But we just have to listen to what are the nudgings, what are the ways that God is leading us. So bringing it all together, we've got this narrative from these 7 letters where you've got, I didn't even bring it back to the 7 letters. The third point, what are you going to do about it? The commonality between them all is the thing at the end. There is 2 refrains that are repeated between them all, which I love, and I want to point out is words which are in many ways quoting what Jesus said many times in his ministry, but whoever has ears, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. And then following on to that is to the one who is victorious. It's that idea that we get to experience. This is like the people of the churches are the ones that are victorious. If they are faithful, if they are obedient, if they are acting out these things that God is saying, it's like you will be victorious. And it's like we are part of this victorious contingent. Not because of anything we do, but because that is the invitation Christ gives us, the invitation Jesus gives us. Because, as I said before, the message of Revelation, the message of Scripture, is the Lamb wins. Jesus wins, and he invites us into that victory. He invites us to be part of that. And that is part of why we choose what we're going to do about it. And we want to step forward boldly, step forward courageously, step forward where we push ourselves out of our comfort zones because we go, God, you have given us the victory, so we want to live all of us, for you.